Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Mayor Scott Slifka, and it is a pleasure for me to be here today for the 19th annual celebration of the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. And please begin by giving a round of applause to the folks to my right, the Hall High School Jazz Combo. The musicians here today are Nick Paul on bass, Joey Siegel on guitar, and Peter Hoyle on trumpet, and their music director is James Antonucci. Thanks, everybody. Now, West Hartford is privileged in that if you've been to this more than once, you'll know that we have not just one but two jazz combos. And the jazz combos at each of the high schools alternate performances at this special annual event. The Hall Jazz Combo is a student-run group that performs throughout the Hartford area. And over the past few years, they've had the opportunity to perform in Austria, Germany, Switzerland, and Italy while on the Euro tours, and in Boston at the Berkeley Jazz Festival. They arrange music for their combo as well as play jazz standards with their own flair. Please give them one more round of applause. Today's celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King's life is the result of a dedicated group of people who meet throughout the year and have been doing this for many, many years. They are Elena and Booker Devon and Janet Jackson of the West Hartford African American Social and Cultural Organization, Judy Wyman of the West Hartford Human Rights Commission, Dr. Nancy DePalma and Marianne Ayers of the West Hartford Public Schools, and Renee McHugh of the town of West Hartford. Special thanks also, yes, please give them a round of applause. Special thanks also go to West Hartford Community Television for airing this event live, yet again, and to the Elmwood Senior Center for providing refreshments. I'd also like to take a moment to introduce some of my our other state and local officials, and you might see me scrambling to write notes as we begin this, and it's not because I'm trying to revise my remarks, so I'm trying to make sure that I don't leave anybody out, and I hope that I don't. But we have some that are here and some that I know are in transit. From the Town Council, Deputy Mayor Sherry Cantor, Burke Dorr, Minority Leader Denise Hall, Claire Kindle, and Judy Casperson, who I think is coming in shortly, but she sent her husband Olaf here to make sure that the Casperson family was covered. From our state delegation, State Senator Beth Bai, I see you sitting over here, and State Representative Joe Varengia. So no, State Representative Brian Becker called me, and he's had a family emergency, unfortunately could not be here this morning. Actually is trying to still be here, so he may come at some point. From our Board of Education, we have Dr. Terry Schmidt and Tammy Exum. And from the town, we have our Chief of Police, Tracy Gove, and Tom Moore, our Superintendent of Schools. And I think I even saw my own brother here who is representing the governor's office in his capacity as the governor's special advisor for people with disabilities. So thank you all for being here. And next, before we begin our program, I would like to share some exciting news about, well, Hello West Hartford, a group I hope you've become familiar with over the years at this event and throughout the year. They have now formalized their mission statement, and they formed a working relationship with Great by 8, the Noah Webster House, and Growing Great Schools. They have 3 upcoming events to which we are all invited to attend. The first is Taste of Culture, a multicultural dining and entertainment event, which is actually a tavern night at the Noah Webster House on January 24th. There are 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock seatings, and you can register online at noahwebsterhouse.org. Second is Breakfast Around the World, a multicultural look at the importance of breakfast. Perhaps not surprisingly, it's a breakfast event. It starts at 7:30 and runs to 9:30 in the morning on January 30th at the Universalist Church on Fern Street, and it is free and open to the public. And the final event is the annual town-wide multicultural celebration right here in Town Hall on April 27th from 5:30 to 8:30. It is a grand event. You should not miss it. And it's had, in the last few years, over 500 people celebrating through music, food, dance, and language. And last but not least, before I introduce our MC, I'd just like to reflect for a moment and pay tribute to our keynote speaker from last year. Over the course of the 19 years that West Hartford has held this event, we've been blessed with a wealth of speakers who have shared their reflections on Dr. King's life and legacy. This was perhaps never more true than last year, when we were joined by John Doerr, a 2012 recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom and father of my town council colleague, Burke Doerr. Mr. Doerr was respected for his role in some of the most significant events of the 1960s relating to the Civil Rights Movement, stemming from his leadership of the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. In 1962, he stood by James Meredith as he entered the University of Mississippi as its first African-American student. He also led the prosecution of 18 Ku Klux Klan members for the 1964 murder of civil rights workers Andrew Goodman, James Chaney, and Michael Schwerner. When Mr. Doerr spoke to us last year, he shared with us his personal interactions with Dr. King. So it's no exaggeration to say that we witnessed living history. We also, sadly, witnessed Mr. Doerr's last public appearance as he passed away last November. So I want to thank Burke and his family for sharing their father with us and hope that we will understand how privileged we were to have him come to West Hartford and share that history with us so personally and for what was the final time. I know that I'll never forget that. Now, thank you. When introducing him last year, I shared a quote that I believe summarized his life. It was, "Some are born great, such as heirs to the throne. Some achieve greatness through years of study and hard work, such as Thomas Edison. Some have greatness thrust upon them, in that they did not seek greatness nor expect greatness, but they found themselves in situations that required them to do something extraordinary, such as the Nazi resistors in World War II or the leaders of the Underground Railroad. They are all ordinary people who did extraordinary things." Something I had learned about Mr. Doerr is that he did not join the Justice Department intent on changing the world. Rather, he had left a small town in Wisconsin to take a job in Washington that no one wanted and with no prospects of a long tenure. But when he was called to change history, just a very short time later, he was both ready and extremely brave. What I did not appreciate until recently is that much of the same can be said about Dr. King himself. The recent film Selma has been praised in part for depicting the impact of Dr. King's work on his personal life, particularly the toll that it took on his family and marriage, aspects of his character not normally explored. Today, Dr. King is a revered icon with a national holiday in his honor. But while he was actually performing his work, he was a poorly paid minister in his 30s with a wife and 4 kids, struggling with many of the same challenges we all face every day. He didn't seek greatness. He sought to right wrongs, and he performed in an extraordinary manner. I think there's a lesson there for all of us. Now I am very pleased to introduce our MC for today, Audrey Washington of NBC Connecticut. Please give her a round of applause. Audrey has broken several significant news stories in her career, including the Regency Plaza kidnapping case, the controversial release of the convicted child murderer Michael Woodmansee, the Alan Jones murder trial, and the 2009 Georgetown tornado. Hoping today will be much safer than where you usually are. She even scored an exclusive interview with President Barack Obama. She's worked at news stations in Rhode Island, Syracuse, Greenville, North Carolina, and New York City. She's a graduate of Pace University and joined NBC Connecticut in March 2012. Also, particularly impressive, if I got this right, if you check her Twitter feed today, she was covering a live fire in Terryville about 5 or 6 hours ago, and she's still here now and awake. So with all that, please welcome Audrey Washington.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everyone, for coming out today. I am so honored to be here as we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And you know, I just wanted to briefly say a few words, just listening to the mayor just now talk about some of my accomplishments and my work and my career. And it struck me to just mention a little bit about how if it was not for Dr. Martin Luther King, I would not be here today. He, along with many civil rights leaders, marched. Yes, they gave speeches, yes, but they also pushed for a policy that ensures equal rights for all, and that is why we are here today. They persevered and fought past injustice. That's why we are here to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So again, thank you so much for having me today. I'm so pleased to be here. So first, as we begin our program, we will talk a little bit about the opening prayer by Jerry Streets. But from year to year, the MLK committee thoughtfully selects a member from a different faith community to give the opening prayer. This year, we are fortunate to have Jerry Streets, Yale University's former chaplain and presently Associate Professor of Social Work at the University of St. Joseph. Please, everyone, give him a warm welcome to Mr. Jerry Streets.
Thank you for who you are.
Thank you.
The diversity among and within the members of our global family is represented here today. Some of us, for example, may be Christian, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, Native American spiritualist, pagan, atheist, or agnostic. We may describe ourselves as being spiritual but not religious people, or as seekers of spiritual truths and religious faith. Religions across cultures and time all teach and share similar ideas about love and the aspirations that we can be better people and benefit humanity. The dream of which Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke, that all of us judge one another not by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character, is older than America herself. It was a dream, I believe, of our Creator when God looked upon the first human beings and said, "That's good." Each generation has to witness and work to make this dream a reality for the people of their time. And so I invite Julia and others of her age to come and stand with me as I offer this prayer. If you are in middle school, high school, just a couple of people from those areas of life, just come on, stand with me. You don't have to say anything or do anything. Just give me a few young people, come and stand behind me. I think I saw a couple of high schoolers right here, yeah. My. What a vision here and out there of hope. Would you give all of these young people a round of your applause? Those of us of a certain age may have had the experience like I had when I was 16 years old of hearing Dr. Martin Luther King in person when he came to speak at my church on the south side of Chicago. If you are a person in the room who saw and heard Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in person, would you stand? So now I invite you in honor and in keeping with Dr. King's legacy to receive this prayer in the spirit of your religious tradition or as an expression of our collective desire to make our world safer, less violent, more just, and peaceful. These are some of the attributes that cause us to remember and celebrate the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. However, these traits guide us beyond him and toward the source of all creation. Therefore, let us pray. Gracious God, you have formed us in your likeness. We are drawn here today to celebrate that within us is a spirit that gives us the capacity to love one another. Our expectations of truth and justice can give us hope, but their late arrival can make being patient a living agony. Therefore, compassionate God, increase our awareness of our common bonds, our respect for one another, and the will to diminish all forms of violence. Help us to challenge injustice and to aid those who are oppressed. We pray that for people everywhere who are suffering, and for those who are suffering from wounds that are visible and invisible caused by warfare, and that a way of peace come quickly to those parts of our world defiled by war. Let us not lose confidence in the power of good to overcome evil and freedom to vanquish the grip of tyranny. Help the leaders of our nations to discipline their use of power with humility. In this time of our being together, we seek insight and guidance or a new awareness of what is possible for us, what is possible for others, and what is possible for our world about which we care. Keep our hearts open that we may receive and also be conduits of your love and mercy to others. Help us to be alert to the graces we receive every day in ways that are small, as well as when they appear to us in full measure, causing us to grasp with gratitude. We offer our thanks for things that delight and fill us with hope. We are especially grateful for the hope represented here today by each child, by each young person, by each young adult. The prayers of our children come in the forms of their laughter. The prayers of our children comes in the forms of their playing. The prayers of our children come through their imaginings and in their curiosity, and oh yes, in their dreams. And they praise you with their natural capacity to love and wanting to be loved in return. Therefore, help us all, whatever our paths and wherever our paths lead us, to be ambassadors and instruments of peace, good neighbors to others, and stewards of our earth. And because of this, may future generations rise up and call all of our names blessed. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Streets. Now, if everyone would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. There it is. I pledge of allegiance to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Each year, students from the 4 grade levels at the 2 West Hartford public high schools are invited to deliver the student perspective on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life. Students are asked to compose a paper on how Dr. King influenced their lives or the history of the United States, and then read the paper before a committee of social studies teachers. The 2 students who were chosen from among all of the applicants are Caitlin Jones of Kennard High School and Lydia Henning of Hall High School. Caitlin, please come forward.
Good morning. My name is Caitlin Jones, and I'm a junior at Kennard High School. My history teacher, Dr. Wilson, came to me one day and asked me to think and share my perspective on what Martin Luther King's actions and accomplishments mean to the everyday teenager. At first, I thought to myself how easy this was going to be, given the fact that Dr. King has been a topic we have covered in school as early as elementary school. However, after researching his life more closely and revisiting the issue of race as early as the 1600s, it struck me that I would need to give this more thought. There was nothing simple about his life. Dr. Martin Luther King had so many amazing accomplishments in his life. As I read Dr. King's work, like the letters from the Birmingham jail and his famous I Have a Dream speech, I became enamored with his poetic yet scholarly insights that wooed the nation from the 1950s through the 1960s. It was his drive and strong beliefs that allowed him many opportunities to flourish in America as a successful Black man, not only during his short life, but even after his death. One of his most historic speeches is the I Have a Dream speech, which he read to thousands of people in Washington, D.C. In honor of him, I decided to use the word dream as an acronym to outline how I believe Martin Luther King has shaped my life and the lives of many of us today. Determination. When reflecting on the acronym for the word dream, the letter D brought to mind the word determination. As Americans, we should reflect on Dr. King's unwavering determination during his life and not only admire it, but encourage others to aspire to it in their personal and everyday lives. There was many events in Dr. King's life that were a testament to his determination and dedication for equality. The Montgomery boycott, his works with voter registration throughout the South, and his sermon in November of 1957 entitled, "Loving Thy Enemies," are only to name a few. Another event that stuck with me and clearly demonstrated his determination was the Selma to Montgomery march that took place on Bloody Sunday in 1965. Dr. King took a huge risk walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge that day, leading hundreds of people into the face of harm and death, or in potential death and danger. I wondered, what must it have felt like at such a young age to look death in the eyes in exchange for fighting for one's rights? What courage did it take to know that your beliefs were shaping the actions of so many people? Today, I have seen this remarkable act of bravery passed on to other individuals in history, including our current Nobel Peace Prize winner, Malala Yousafzai. Malala is a Pakistani girl who was shot in the face because she wanted the right to be educated in her country. As a teen, both of these activists make me realize and understand that determination does not come when it is with any age limit or any restrictions. Doing what one believes when it is tied to justice is always honorable when you are doing work that is meaningful not just to yourself, but to others as well. Resilience. The R made me think of the word resilience. Dr. King lived during a time period in our history where living and enjoying life was never without barriers. Whether it was sitting on a bus, voting, or simply trying to get a meal in a local diner. He and others were faced with all of these issues, and yet rather than becoming angered by injustices that seemed impossible to resolve, he took each one and overcame them with a nonviolent approach. You can't sit where you want to sit on a bus, start a boycott. You can't sit at a local diner, encourage a sit-in. All of these peaceful events ultimately resulted in what was looked at as criminal acts and resulted in jail for so many people, including Dr. King himself. Nonetheless, it resulted in the change and the justice people really wanted. It was in a letter written by Dr. King from a Birmingham jail that stated, "I wish you had commended the Negro sit-inners and demonstrators of Birmingham for their sublime courage, their willingness to suffer, and their amazing discipline in the midst of great provocation. One day, the South will recognize its real heroes." Thinking about Dr. King's resilience helps me stay optimistic in overcoming obstacles that are placed in my life and in society, like classism, sexism, and racism. Based on his fearless actions, I know that by being active and present and standing up for justice, I can shape and be an instrument of change. Emancipation. My choice for the letter E was easy, emancipation. When most people hear the word emancipation, their mind quickly goes to the idea of Lincoln freeing the slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. However, my interpretation of the word went to the literal definition of the word, which means the process of being set free of social or political restrictions. Liberation. This described Dr. King's very purpose. From the time he was a child and realized that he was considered to be inferior to his white friends, his goal was to rise up and emancipate himself from all the stereotypes that were attached to his race. He chose to be educated and get all that education had to offer him. He not only attended prestigious schools such as Morehouse College and Crozer Theological Seminary, but he went on to receive a doctorate in theology at Boston University by the age of 26. After accomplishing all of this, Dr. King went on to show everyone how he was a devoted pastor, a loving father and husband, a charismatic speaker, and a strong leader. His ability as a role model to change the perspective of millions of people while only living a short life helps me to aim for the same kind of transformation with my own life. I know that life is not about what I wear, where I live, or how others think I should act. It is about what I think, who I am, and who I will ultimately become. The thought of this just motivates me to reveal to everyone who I am, how I am a loving daughter, I am a hardworking student, a caring friend, and an active member in our community. Altruistic. A stands for altruistic. This means public-spirited, selfless, and always putting others first. Dr. King always was a man for the people. His church, Ebenezer Baptist Church, was always crowded week after week with people waiting to hear his sermons. I looked at a picture taken of him as he was preaching one Sunday. It was beyond belief for me to see the amount of pure captivation in the eyes of every member in the congregation that was listening. Dr. King's words were no doubt touching, and though many may have disagreed with what he was saying, they couldn't help but be enlightened and transformed by him. He knew that his words were saving and changing lives every day. When his life was put at risk, he chose to go on. The bombing attempts, brutal beatings, drawn-out jail sentences, and the possibility of him leaving his wife a widow and his children fatherless did not stop him from going on. Not just because he wanted to prove those wrong that tried to pull him down, but because he knew that he was leading a fight that was not just for himself, but for the millions of people who couldn't do it for themselves. His dedication to service paved the way for so many people today. Sometimes I think we take so much for granted. Dr. King once said, "Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love." As a teen, it's not fair to just live to make our lives matter, but making an important cause to say that all lives matter. Black, white, young, old, Jewish, Gentile, gay, straight, or otherwise, all lives matter. Magnanimity. Finally, the letter M stands for magnanimity. Magnanimous means very generous or forgiving in insult or injury. Of all the words that made me think of Dr. King and his dream, this word had the strongest effect on me. Looking back at the civil rights movement as a whole, I wonder if I could have been forgiving of all the pain throughout that journey. From the segregation in the South in America, to the countless attacks on peaceful boycotts and sit-ins across the South, to the inhumane injustice of the Little Rock 9 students at Little Rock Central High School, to the lynching of far too many African American men, women, and children on a daily basis. While it's important to accept what happened during that time period as being an infamous moment in history, we should try to look ahead to a brighter future knowing that we hold the keys to ensure that these injustices will never happen again. Although the events of the civil rights movement brewed anger and confusion, Dr. King lived his life through the teaching and principles of strong men like Jesus, Gandhi, and even Nelson Mandela, who taught him that violence was never the answer. He once said, we must develop and maintain the capacity to forgive. He who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love. There is some good in the worst of us and some evil in the best of us. When we discover this, we are less prone to hate our enemies. In spite of our greatness, America is still divided by our different beliefs. Unfortunately, at times, people lash out using violence to express their frustrations against one person or an entire group of people. We must learn to be magnanimous like Dr. King and have more forgiving hearts. We can't hold the actions of one person over the head of an entire race, black or white. In many of these situations, one ignorant act sparks another ignorant act. I think rather than fighting against one another, we should try to educate ourselves by thinking of the past and open our minds to understanding each other's views. Although I don't agree with everything that I see or hear in this world, I know that I must make an effort to see every side of every issue. I also think that what makes our generation so unique, unlike the generations that came before us, is that our thinking is more open to change and compromise more than any point in history. So we should use this thinking to not accelerate the change, but truly make the change. In closing, I would like to say I am so proud to be a descendant of the Civil Rights Movement. I stand before you today as a teen, a young woman, and an African American, knowing that Dr. King's dream and dedication allows me to know with certainty that I can do anything in this life if I set my mind to it. As Maya Angelou once said, we may encounter many defeats, but we must not be defeated. I know that just like Dr. King, I have to be a light in a dark place. I must be strong when I feel weak, and I must help to pull others up, because it is then that I will be a help to myself and others. I stand before you today saying that I am ready to take that challenge. These 5 words, determination, resilience, emancipation, altruism, and magnanimity are a culmination of the will to exist, the durability of a struggle, and the realization of a dream. Thank you.
That was excellent, Caitlin. Now let's hear from Lydia of Hall High School. Lydia?
Thank you for having me today. I have to admit, I was nervous when I was invited to speak at this event. We just finished our unit on the Civil Rights Movement in my American Studies class, and I've always admired Martin Luther King, but I didn't know much about him. After some surface-level research, I was struck by the complexity and depth of Dr. King's philosophy about nonviolence. The triple evils, the 6 principles of nonviolence, the 6 steps of nonviolent change, and the beloved community. I'm sure there's so much more to learn than when I've researched, but I was almost overwhelmed by the expanse of knowledge. I put off writing this speech for a long time, both because I was afraid of saying the wrong thing and also because I didn't really know where to start. My mom gave me some advice. She said, "Don't be afraid to say something." She meant that I shouldn't be afraid to make a point and say something important. So that's what I'm going to try to do today, say something of importance about Martin Luther King and how we can use his message to better ourselves and our community. Martin Luther King was a great activist and a promoter of peace and nonviolence. He lived in a time when hatred and prejudice were a daily routine and dedicated his life to creating a community of justice and equality. 50 years later, Dr. King's message still has a profound impact on the way we view justice and nonviolent protest. As a leader of the Civil Rights Movement, he effected change and impacted the lives of individuals as well as legislation. Yet here in 2015, we still experience hate and oppression because, in the words of Minnie Jean Brown, one of the Little Rock Nine, dismantling the results of hundreds of years of white supremacy required more than a Supreme Court decision. I will never be followed in a store because of my skin color. I'll never be told I'm pretty for a white girl. I can be mad about the recent events with police brutality without having to fear my life. And if I don't want to, I don't have to think about the fact that I have an incredible amount of privilege because I'm white. I know that privilege is an uncomfortable discussion to have, especially because we'd all like to think that we're good people. I know it's not personally my fault that the institutions of America systematically value my life more than the life of a person of color, but it is my responsibility to acknowledge the privilege I have and actively work towards dismantling oppression within those institutions. Dr. King's third principle of nonviolence is that nonviolence seeks to defeat injustice, not people. This struck a chord with me because in my experience with social justice work, it very often becomes us versus them. Us, the good, socially aware people, and everyone else who is ignorant and wrong. This response is understandable because the world can be a cruel place. It's comforting to find people who accept you and love you unconditionally for every part of you, who celebrate your culture and your sexuality and your gender and your abilities. It becomes easy to scorn people who have different viewpoints because those viewpoints are often harmful or judgmental. I'm part of Action Club at my school and president of Feminist Coalition, and I'll be the first to say that I'd rather have a conversation with people who agree with me with how I see the world than someone who disagrees with me. Especially around the topic of social justice, it's so easy to look down on people who don't know as much or who say offensive things or don't recognize that we live in an unjust world that needs to be changed. But it's not the people we should be despising, but the beliefs they hold. Everyone is born sweet and innocent and cute. As we grow up, we are bombarded with messages from our parents, teachers, friends, media, religious institutions, and countless other sources about people who are like us and people who are different from us. We learn that girls wear pink and boys wear blue, that doing a good deed is Christian, that Asians are smart, that rich people just worked really, really hard to get where they are. It's nearly impossible to pinpoint the first time you learned all of this because we kind of just absorbed the messages growing up. You can't ignore them. This is socialization, the unconscious process of learning and internalizing prejudices about all different groups of people. Thus, Dr. King's message about evildoers also being victims holds true when you consider that we all grew up learning information that was never specifically taught. Dr. King said, "Forgiveness is not an occasional act, it is a constant attitude." I have struggled with this myself, especially with my friends. I barely go a day without seeing someone wearing a t-shirt depicting a Native American head symbolizing the reservation, our school students' fan section. The girls' swim team just got their clothing, and the hat has a Native American head, even though that image is no longer the official mascot at Hall. Every time I see someone wear the reservation t-shirt or a Warrior sweatshirt, it feels like someone poked me really hard in the gut. The topic of mascots is too long and complicated to dive very deeply into. However, even though I am not an American Indian, I am deeply offended by the continued racist and hurtful use of an inaccurate and dehumanizing stereotype for our mascot, a position that is usually held by an animal or an object. It is especially difficult for me to see my friends or people I know wearing the t-shirt. It is hard for me to separate the injustice from the people. With close friends, my immediate reaction has been to have a discussion about why I dislike the shirt and to ask them to stop wearing it, because I know my friends will listen and probably be more willing to change. With acquaintances, my initial response is distrust and dismissal of them as someone I respect. I find myself judging people before I even have a conversation with them and making assumptions based on an aspect of who they are. My behavior can be an awful lot like the very behavior we work so hard to prevent. If I, and anyone else who is upset by the degrading t-shirts, never have conversations with the people who wear them, we will never be able to affect change. If we close ourselves off and never acknowledge that we all, at some point, have probably associated with people in the reservation, we can never take that first step towards education and unlearn socialization. If I never have a conversation with people who wear reservation t-shirts, not only will I never be able to share my opinions on it, I will probably lose some friends, and everyone in the reservation will continue to think that what they do is okay. Life is too short to let manipulative and harmful people control you, But if you never find yourself in situations where you see injustice, you will never be able to fight those injustices. You don't have to look very far to find transgressions. Just remember that the people who commit them aren't the enemy. Above all, we need to start conversations about confronting injustices and taking action, because that is the only way we will reach equality. In the words of Dr. King, the end is reconciliation, the end is redemption, the end is the creation of the beloved community. It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opponents into friends. It is this type of understanding goodwill that will transform the deep gloom of the old age into the exuberant gladness of the new age. It is this love which will bring about miracles in the hearts of people. Thank you.
Let's give another round of applause for Caitlin and Lydia. Excellent. And as you leave Town Hall today, take note of the Martin Luther King Jr. plaque that hangs on the wall in the lobby near the elevators. It contains the names of all the students who have delivered a speech on this holiday since 1997, the year West Hartford began holding the annual celebration. Today, we will add 2 more names, Caitlin and Lydia. Now, as you can see, we have the pleasure of hearing the voices of Bristow from Bristow Middle School. Voices of Bristow is an auditioned choir made up of students in grades 6 through 8. They perform 5 to 6 times a year at various venues. This ensemble was selected to perform at the CMEA State Conference in 2014 and has earned gold and platinum ratings at Fantastic Festival adjudicated events. They are under the direction of Carla McLean. Today, they will be singing Shine on Me, a traditional spiritual arranged by Rollo Dilworth. They will be accompanied by Sam Urich, music director of Kennard High School.
Shine on me.
Thank you, Voices of Bristow, for that wonderful performance. Now I am pleased to welcome Booker Devon, who will tell us about our keynote speaker. Mr. Devon is a West Hartford resident and a member of the West Hartford African American Social and Cultural Organization, a sponsor of this event.
This year's keynote speaker is Linda Kelly, president of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, a community foundation that serves 29 towns in the greater Hartford region. She has held the top position since 2005. As one of the oldest and largest community foundations in the country, the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving has awarded $589 million since its inception in 1925. From homeless shelters to food pantries, from theaters to libraries, and from parks to family centers, the Hartford Foundation works on every issue in every corner of Greater Hartford. Linda Kelly's extensive background includes Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Public Utility, Deputy Commissioner of Banking, and was a member of the Public Defender Services Commission and the Connecticut Bar Association Foundation. She received her Juris Doctor degree from the University of Connecticut School of Law. Active in her community, Ms. Kelly has spent decades serving a variety of nonprofit and civic organizations in Greater Hartford. Please join me in welcoming Linda Kelly.
Good morning. Well, first, I have to I'm so pleased to see so many young people here, and the performances, the musical performances are great, and our young speakers, I'll tell you, they have moved me so much with their inspiring words, their passion, their commitment, their bravery to take on some significant issues that they, in their young lives, confront on a daily basis. So where do we go from here? Dr. King, whose message spread throughout the world, accomplished so much for our country during his brief 39 years. He is well remembered for the I Have a Dream speech delivered on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in 1963, when he spoke of some Americans existing on the lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. We ask ourselves, has that changed? Here, today, 50 years later, in our region, do we still see such poverty disproportionately impacting people of color, women, and children? The 60s were a time of severe racial segregation, and Dr. King's speech included his dream that one day children, regardless of race, could join hands as sisters and brothers. That was 1963. 1 year later, and 10 years following the Supreme Court's Brown versus Board of Education decision, my brother and I joined 6 other African American students to comprise the entire Black student body at the previously all-white high school, helping to set our small town in North Carolina on the path toward racially integrated public schools. You see, as Dr. King alluded to, growing up in the South in the 50s and 60s, everything was governed by race. How was that for a Black youngster? It was a time and place when I could not sit down at the drugstore lunch counter, could not visit the public library except the small and, of course, less well-stocked Negro branch, could not access the public park, could not drink water from a public fountain except the one marked colored. could not sit wherever I chose on the bus. Black children and white children could not attend the same schools, and once we reached school age, were no longer permitted to play together, even if we were neighbors. These few examples of the prescriptive nature of a segregated society based purely on race permeated our communities, affected every aspect of our lives, served as a constant reminder that some were viewed as lesser than, different from. And it deeply impacted this nation and the principles it espoused. We have moved forward. Those days of harsh, legally imposed, socially accepted segregation, of so-called separate but equal accommodations, and I can tell you they were not equal, are behind us. We have not yet fully embraced our diversity as a nation or even as a community. So where do we go from here? In 1967, Dr. King authored his final book, and it is entitled, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? Even then, he recognized that turbulent times lay ahead. Consider the issues we are currently confronting. Charges of disparate treatment and police brutality against Black citizens. Failures in our education system that leave behind poor children and many children of color, giving Connecticut the distinction of having the worst achievement gap in the nation. Jobs that don't pay a family-sustaining wage, leading to poverty that continues to keep some of our communities from growing and thriving. Dr. King spoke of these matters nearly 50 years ago, and they still present challenges. Challenges that we as a community can and must address. As Dr. King famously said, in spite of the difficulties and frustrations of the moment, I still have a dream. He recognized that the fight for equality and social justice could not be fought alone, nor won alone, by America's Black citizens. But many of our white brothers, and I say and sisters, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny, and their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And indeed, we have not walked alone in this cause for social justice. Dr. King looked to the future and considered the ever-increasing globalization as a great new challenge for mankind. In his book, Where Do We Go From Here?, he likens the situation to having inherited a great world house in which we have to live together, Black and white, Easterner and Westerner, Gentile and Jew, Catholic and Protestant, Muslim and Hindu, a family unduly separated in ideas, culture, and interest, who, because we can never again live apart, must learn somehow to live with each other in peace. Consider those words as you watch the 6 o'clock news and the events that are unfolding all over the world, currently in Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, but no country or continent in this new world house can escape that choice of chaos or community grounded in brotherly love. Yes, this new world house applies on an international and a national level, and it also applies locally. In fact, in this, our greater Hartford region, more than 100 different languages are spoken in homes, reflecting the diversity in our schools and in our towns. And right here in West Hartford, more than 70 languages are spoken. Now, this information is from a report, Progress Points, sponsored by the Hartford Foundation, working with many of our regional partners to show that, among other things, that we are so interconnected as towns and cities. I am so fortunate to currently serve as president of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, an organization that is a catalyst for change in the communities we serve. Over the course of my life, I had no way of knowing that the principles instilled in me by my parents to be involved with, participate in, give back to my community would help lead me toward this work. Here, I see firsthand the differences in economic class, in educational achievement, in healthcare, in neighborhood economic development, and access to arts and culture. But I am also privileged to see firsthand how good people can and do have positive and significant impact on the lives of others. So I ask again, where do we go from here? How do we make our community, our state, our nation, into its best possible self? We must be willing and able to adjust to new ideas and remain informed, vigilant, and ready to face the challenge of change. This then serves as a call to all of us, parents, grandparents, guardians, students, teachers, religious, philanthropic, and community leaders, government officials, business and corporate executives, a call to ensure that we are raising a generation of people with all its diversity who can fully participate in this society, can succeed in educational endeavors, can take advantage of new and developing business opportunities, can compete in this global economy. Every undertaking does not have to be a major one led by someone else. We should not sit by waiting for the next Martin Luther King, but consider the ways, even the small ways, we can have an impact. The anthropologist Margaret Mead once said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." So it begins with you. It begins with me. We can offer our time and talent to others, volunteer. We can teach the children of our community well by embracing diversity and being intolerant of intolerance. Support the educational achievement and economic development in all of our neighborhoods. Stay informed. Exercise that very precious right to vote. And young people, be open and welcoming to your fellow students. Challenge them when you need to challenge them. But do not tolerate bullying in any form. And for all of us, take a stand against injustice, anywhere and everywhere. The fact that so many of you gather to celebrate the vision, accomplishments, and challenges left to us by Dr. King is testament to your dedication to the principles of his dream for a just and compassionate society for all. We must all commit to address any inequities we may encounter, any blights on our American dream. We must recognize and celebrate the richness of our world house and marshal the collaboration and collective wisdom of city and suburb alike, involving all our residents, regardless of race or gender, sexual orientation or gender identity, religion or economic status. Relying on the talents of all, without artificial barriers, enriches the entire community. Our destinies are tied together. I challenge us all, again, especially our young people, to be that instrument for change, the ones who set that positive direction of where we go from here, and choosing, of course, community over chaos. In closing, I would like to share with you brief excerpts from one of my favorite poems that relates to diversity, opportunity, and hope. This poem, On the Pulse of Morning by Maya Angelou, was delivered by her at the inauguration of President Clinton in 1993, 30 years after Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. And of course, today, with our bright sunshine, I think it's particularly pertinent. Excerpts from On the Pulse of Morning. Lift up your faces. You have a piercing need for this bright morning dawning for you. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, and if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Lift up your eyes upon this day breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Before we close with songs from Conard High School's Voices of the World, I would like to call your attention to the artwork and essays on display in the hallway just outside the auditorium doors. The artwork and essays are the product of children in West Hartford's public elementary schools. The children learned about the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as part of their social studies and language arts curriculum on Famous Americans. The children read about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., studied his well-known speeches, his important contributions to our country, and then wrote essays and poems about his life and created artwork on how King's message relates to their own lives. Also on display today is an award-winning essay by 10th grader Hope Rainey of Hall High School. Hope's essay, entitled Layers of Racism, took first place in the 9th, 10th grade category in the University of Connecticut's Martin Luther King Jr. Day Essay Contest. Hope, please stand. Hope? Hope here? Okay, I guess Hope is standing in spirit then. Congratulations to all, and please stop by and take a look after the program. All right, without further ado, please welcome the Conard High School Voices of the World Choir, led by choral director Sam Urick. Voices of the World is one of several choirs at the high school. Voices of the World places a value on all music of the world, including gospel and spirituals. They are happy to be here today to offer music in the memory of Dr. Martin Luther King. Their song selections today is Balm of Gilead, arranged by Von Campen, and Wanting Memories by Yisei Barnwell. The choir will conclude today's program with We Shall Overcome. Be sure to join in. The words are on the back of your program. So without further ado.
on the things that made me feel so wonderful when I was young. I think on the things that made me laugh, made me dance, made me sing. I think on the things that made me grow into a being full of pride. Think on these things, for they are true. I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. I thought that you were gone, but now I know you're with me. You are the voice of all I need to hear. I know a please, a thank you, and a smile will take me far. I know that I am you and you are me and we are one. I know that who I am is numbered in each grain of sand. I know that I've been blessed again and again and again and again.
And for We Shall Overcome, I'd like to recognize Ben McDonough, who's a senior at Conard High School, coming down to give a little bit of help with the start of each of the verses' lyrics. So at this time, if you could all rise for the singing of We Shall Overcome, all together as a group.
We shall overcome. We are not afraid. We shall stand together. We shall live in peace. We shall all be free.
Let's have another round of applause, everyone. All right, I ask everyone to please take a moment to complete the feedback cards. So they're inside the program there in the middle, just so we can bring you another wonderful celebration next year. And you may hand your feedback card to any one of the individuals standing by the exit doors. And help yourself to refreshments provided by Elmwood Senior Center, and please visit the student displays. Thank you everyone for coming, and we will see you back here next year. Thank you.